Good morning, everybody. And my name is Ingo Lütgebole. I'm okay. Could you? Yeah, this microphone. Is this okay? Um, so I'm a computer scientist from the Computational Perception Lab at Bielefeld University, and I will be talking a little bit about visual surveillance, what we can do, and what is possible there, and what the limitations are. But first, let me start by giving you a brief overview of what visual motion analysis is about anyway. So the goal here is to get a compact description in a computerized way, symbolic way of motion. And you can do this at various levels, which are illustrated in the image to the right here. As you can see, the first level you can do motion analysis is at the body configuration level. If you look at these green cylinders here, they are intended to be about the body, the torso, the head, and the arm, and so on. And so the first way you can look at this is how is the body configured in a way. And if you look at this yellow trajectory here, that's also a way to describe motion. It's the motion path that the hand took. And last but not least, and probably the most familiar way to humans is this is an operation on the block. The block is the one he has here in his hand, and he operated on it in some way. And this is most natural to humans, but it's the most difficult way for a computer to do. So what can we use this for, actually? This is not just for surveillance, and actually, as I will mention later, I'm not a surveillance person. What I do is human-computer interaction stuff. So you talk with a computer, you make gestures to a computer, and it understands you. That's basically the idea. But another application is in games. Maybe some of you have seen this Sony iToy for the PlayStation 2, which has a camera, and you wave in front of it, and it can basically do the game interaction by just using your body instead of a joypad or something. One big area that has done a lot of the early work in visual motion analysis is motion capture for movies, where an actor plays out something and an interactive persona, a cartoon character or something like, is animated to do the same motion as a human, and you get very human-like behavior that way, much more human-like as if you would do the whole animation yourself. But the topic, what I will talk about today is a little bit touching on the topic of surveillance, because that's, of course, one area where motion analysis is probably not that well received. All right, a brief overview. First, I will give a more motivation and an overview. That's what I'm doing now, and talk about what we are doing, actually, so that you will understand the examples. Then I will shortly sketch why this whole problem is why this is a difficult problem, and what the surveillance settings are. Yeah, and afterwards go a little bit about analyzing and the analysis methods of locating humans in the first place, and then a method of tracking, which covers a whole number of methods for finding interesting points, looking what tracking gives us in kind of results, how we can analyze these results. And then shortly give a short introduction to some of the tools you can use for this, that you can play around with. And at the end, I will give some concluding remarks of what I think this whole technical review tells us about the possibilities of surveillance, what's possible and what's not, and what we can expect. Right, first, all my images in this talk will be from the human-computer interaction scenario that you see here, where we have a robot, actually several robots, and a human interacting with them. And this torso robot that you see here with the face and the grasp, and here it has a toy, and the human, that's one of our researchers, is showing in the toy. And this is just to give you an impression what we are doing with it, and why the examples always look kind of like playing with a child, because that's what they are. All right. Good. So why is this difficult first? We have several problems. The first problem is ambiguity. So if you just look at this one picture to the left here, it's difficult to tell what's going on. Is this person passing someone to the other person, or is he pushing it, what's going on here, actually? You can't really tell. And then you see the second problem is that of low resolution. As you can see, you can't see very much. But this is actually the typical resolution that you see on a TV when watching a football game. This is what humans get as input, and we do perfectly well on that. This is because motion is such a big cue, but you have to make use of it. And the last problem that you will see very often is that of occlusion. Here you have two persons, or actually a third one in the background, and they partly occlude each other. So you can only see one, here the one person you can see full, you can see his face, the other person is right next to it, you can only see half of his face and not much of his body, and this person is almost completely invisible. So these are some of the issues that we have to cope with. Right. And then there's one other problem that I like to call the roadrunner problem, which is also the motivation for this title of this talk. And as you can see, poor Wile E. Coyote here is a little bit too late, and the roadrunner is already gone. So what I'm trying to say here is that visual experience doesn't just consist of interpreting the action after it has happened. When humans interpret their visual surroundings, what we do is we have a visual input, a visual experience, then we know a lot about the world around us, and this allows us to predict an activity. And to predict an activity at a point in time when we still have sufficient time to actually act on our prediction and make something happen. And unless we teach that to computers, they will never be able to help us much, because they will only be able to analyze something that has already happened. And this is something that has not received very much attention in the computer science community. But it's a real problem for surveillance. All right, how do humans actually perform these tasks that I've been talking about? And as you can see here, this is a so-called point light display. And it's attached to the joints of a person, and so you cannot see the person or what the person is doing, but you can only see these lights. And for a human, it's pretty well possible to interpret what's going on here. And this is because we have an internal body model. We know how our body is configured and how we could arrange ourselves to look like this point light display. And if you see here, this is the original motion. So there's a person here, it's throwing a cricket bat or something. And if you look here at both of these in conjunction, you can see that the point light displays corresponds very well, and humans can interpret this. And why do we do that? Why are we able to do so? Because we have this body model. And one important insight from psychology here is that this body model is not just from looking at persons. We have this body model because we have a body that is just like the one we are observing. We know when we make a motion and we can see our arm in our visual field and we can walk around, and when we make certain motions we fall over, so they are not possible, and we cannot just like put our arm here and expect this to be a regular view that we typically see. So all this information, this experience we have ourselves constrains what is possible, and this constraint allows us to interpret what other humans do as accurately as we are able to. And this is something the computer can only look at a person. He cannot see. Does not have his own body. He cannot have this motor experience. So if a computer has to be able to do the same kind of interpretation, this body model has to come from somewhere, and this is from humans. Humans have to specify this body model. So this is one very crucial point where the performance of a system is limited by human input. And this, just to give you an idea what kind of body models we are typically working with, it's a skeleton-based model. So you see arms, lower arms, upper arms, lower legs, upper legs, and you have the skeleton. What's the spine, right, and the sphere for the face, for the head. Right. Now let's talk a little bit about what surveillance methods are originally used for. Originally, all these methods for surveillance, they were developed for restricted areas. In restricted areas, you have a very simple problem. There's little activity. What little activity there is already suspicious. So if you can detect anything is going on, that's good enough already. And the use cases here are for alarming And later on, if you know something has happened, then you can look at the video and tell what's going on. And so you have basically a few weeks that you need to store this stuff, because if you don't know that there was a break-in up to a few weeks, it's not going to be much use anyway. Whereas what we are most concerned about is surveillance of public areas. And in public areas, you have a much different, much harder problem, because there's always something going on. And so you first have to separate all these things into different persons, different activities, and then you have to classify them, tell them this person is just walking along, or this person is hitting someone, and you to be able to focus on what is interesting, because most of what you see is not interesting. And what this usually suggested as a deterrent. There's nobody on site to be able to act, but it's supposed to be this idea of when there's camera surveillance, you won't be doing any crimes because you're going to be caught. This is just a hypothesis, of course, and the hypothesis is based on the ability to investigate. So these surveillance systems are meant for later investigations, and of course when something happens, so for this use you only need storage for a few days. Okay. Give you a little bit more idea of what the levels of analysis for surveillance are. So first you have a low resolution, low frame rate, long stretches of nothing going on. This is what makes surveillance the typical images. And what you do there is you categorize behavior, and you can do this at two major levels. The one major level is that you categorize regular versus irregular behavior. Regular behavior is defined as something that is usually going on in an area. So if you look at an entrance or so, it's typical that persons are going to be coming in. And of course, this is bound to the time. So they are typically going to show up between 8 in the morning and let's say 8 in the evening or something, depending on the time of building. And if someone's coming, doing something else there, maybe hanging around or so, that's irregular. Or if you're coming in another time, that's also irregular. And then again, we have a second level of description that is probably more typical of what humans do. This is a scene where first these two guys, he's running at her, and then they're fighting, and last but not least, he's chasing her. So this might constitute a human level description. And this is basically what is most useful. And this, for a computer, the problem is that everything in the image looks the same. It's just a block of pixels, it's just numbers, everything is the same. So what visual motion analysis wants to do is teach a computer to detect the relevant parts of an image where something is going on and interpret it. And so first I'm going to touch a little bit on how the detection of relevant parts is going to happen, or is happening in systems, because as it turns out, this is a very difficult problem. And of course, everything else is based on the relevant parts. So if this selection is bad, everything else is not going to be very, very good. And I'm briefly going into ideas on interpretation at the end. Good. So the first approach is very direct. You just look for motion. Anything so take two images, compare them, and wherever they are different enough, there's motion going on, and look at that. And this example on the right is the output of such an algorithm, and as you can see, it's not very easy to interpret it, but it is possible. So there's two persons here. One, they are moving towards each other, and there's the hands of the person, here's the arm, and there's part of her face. It's not completely in the image. And you can see part of the body, but this is not very good. But this is a very easy method, and it gets rid of all the static parts in the image, but it doesn't tell you very much. And the one problem is that you have these holes where there's similar color. So visual input is not doesn't change from one image to the next, even though there's motion. And then, as you can probably imagine, if two things like this are overlapping, there's going to be an interpretation problem telling these two apart. And so first I'm going to talk a little bit about how you solve the problem with the hole, and then about the major parts about the overlaps and the ambiguity there. Right, so this is one of those overlaps. So there's a person here and there's another person sitting in front. Well, this doesn't look very, very good.